All right, welcome in everybody. This is this month's version of HR Lunch Bunch. I'm glad that you're here. My name is Deborah Jeffries. I work with HR Answers, and we don't have a guest this time around. It's me, it's you. And so if you're comfortable, please bring up your cameras. Let's chat, let's talk. Hopefully I did a little test and you should be able to see the screen share. You should be able to see and hear me. Hopefully I will be able to see and hear you too. I have the chat box open, so feel free. Our conversation today is on the quiet, and I'm guessing that many of you have already been reading and be hearing about definitely quiet quitting, but there's a whole bunch of them out there. And so I really want us to talk a little bit about what are you experiencing? What are you seeing and hearing? What are you doing about some of these? And so in the grand scheme of things, I want to make sure that what are they? What are the trends? And be able to kind of know them, be able to talk truly, discussion, sharing, asking questions, providing each other with ideas. But then if nothing else, one of the things that I think that this is important is when quiet quitting first hit TikTok with a young woman who posted something about the fact that she was unhappy at work and she was drawing her boundaries, it got us talking. And I think if nothing else, because I've been around the block just a few times, and the answer is this is some nice new terminology for some stuff that's been going on for a while. So if it motivates us to talk and take some action, then I'm all about it. And I think we can have some fun too. So I would love it if you would put in who you are, where you're from, where you phoning in from today. Not only your business, but your city if you're coming from a long distance. So by all means, let us know, because this is a way of networking. That's what this whole thing started at in terms of HR Lunch Bunch, was getting HR people an opportunity to network, because many of us were a member of our local SHRM chapters, and we were able to go to monthly meetings. But sometimes HR people are not always good about getting out of the office. We got stuff. And so this was also an opportunity for us to be able to network with each other in a more kind of intimate setting. And then, that little thing happened a couple of years ago. And so this is not quite as intimate in that respects, but nonetheless, we get to chit chat with each other. So feel free to let us know. So thank you, Sue and Rhonda, seeing this stuff going on. Miss Carla, we be chatting. I've been working on stuff for you, Miss Carla. Anyway, so I'm glad to have you guys all here. So, and again, I'm Deborah Jeffries. Work here at HR Answers and have for a number of years. And so it's nice to see some friendly names on the screen. So let's talk about the quiet trends. Now, I don't have very many slides. I just want you to know that, like, not very many at all. I kind of shoved them all into one, so to speak. So these are kind of the trends. And there's one or two more that I want to add to this. So quiet quitting. Now you've all heard this, yes? She says with a question mark. Yes? So there's the answers. There we go. We're chiming in. Okay, so that this really isn't about quiet quitting. What is this really about? You tell me. What is our employees really trying to say to us, and they're not able to kind of like find the right words, or they're not feeling comfortable talking to their supervisor for some reason? And you know what, Sue? I was with a group of people yesterday, a manufacturing firm, and one of the quality managers said, was it last week? Last week was the first time he'd heard the phrase quiet quitting. And so I was kind of surprised. So isn't it wonderful that here we are helping each other out? So there's Miss Rhonda, disengaged, not being recognized, right? Or asking to be involved. And I think that that's an important piece. When we talk about even DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion kinds of stuff. There's a lot of letters that follow after that. And one of them is the letter B for belonging. Do our folks feel a sense of belonging, a sense of connection? Well, guess what? Quiet quitting is also, am I in alignment with the organization? And do I feel a sense of connection and belonging? I said yes to the job. You obviously said yes to me because you asked me to take the job. And what happens after that? And if we have a whole staff of quiet quitters, who's going to take us to next? Who's going to take on those leadership roles, supervisory, grow within the organization? This is about retention. This is about longevity of some sort beyond months or a couple of years. They're feeling overlooked. They're feeling maybe overwhelmed, undervalued, which means our managers and supervisors, our organizations aren't recognizing them in a way that's meaningful to them. That doesn't mean we aren't doing something, but they aren't hearing it. They aren't feeling it, right? So based on those observations and my comments, how are those of you who have maybe experiencing something or talking about it in your organizations, what are you talking about? What are you trying to do? What have you done that to kind of counter this, to work with this? What's going on? This is where you get to unmute, truly unmute and talk to each other.
I think having regular check-ins to see what their process is. I've just instituted a monthly review form for all of my direct reports. And so it gives us a chance to talk about, are they excelling in their current role? Do they need improvement in certain sections in their current role? But then it also opens up the opportunity of, well, what personal goals do you have? And how does that look into? And I think regular communication is key. When you're not talking to somebody and then you're like, oh, they just quit, like for real, versus quiet quitting where they just check out. Ideally it shouldn't be a shock and awe, right? There are some things where people get poached, right? And they're like, the offer was too good. And you're like, no, I understand. I wish you well. It just, isn't great. And things do happen like that. But people that are, quiet quitting on their way out, it's something that happens over time. And I feel just communication can help, buffer that.
I think so too, which means how much, to what depth, right? Absolutely. And those monthly, weekly, every other week, what's appropriate given the position, the role, responsibility in terms of check-ins. And the check-in isn't just about work. It really is about how are you doing? So Carla, I saw you pop in. What's going on in your world?
I was going to say something similar to that as well. The weekly check-ins, the one-on-ones with the employees that we've implemented. And it's not just, jumping straight to, okay, what's the status of projects, but how are you doing? How are things going? The personal touch. And then going into any obstacles that they may have, any hurdles. How are things going? Something else that we're going to start doing is making sure that job descriptions are updated, but also published, that they're available. And it's not something that you just review once a year at performance reviews, but it's available to the employee. And there's that transparency and communication of, hey, these are the expectations, and any questions, don't just wait for that one time a year to review and ask questions. So that way they have that input, the buy-in, and there's that two-way communication.
Absolutely. Oh, I like that. Good. Miss Sue? Or you're muted.
I find that some people don't want to open up a lot in person. So usually give them a form first, then I look it over, and then it's easier to start the conversation. If they've had a chance to put that down on paper and maybe not face to face, that seems to open up the conversation a little easier for them.
So Amy, is that from a just in general, or is that with the check-in meeting with staff? Okay,
Check-ins,
okay.
and we do them monthly. But managers started saying, well, we just go in there and they don't say anything at all. They just say everything's fine. And so I started with the write it out, just the same form. And then I look them over first. I have them submit them to me first, and then involve the manager after that.
Gotcha. Well, and two observations. One, if managers and supervisors, depending on our definition or our layers within the organization, if this is, and I would suggest to you as someone who does a lot of training with managers and supervisors, that this is what I call a non-negotiable. If you want to be an effective supervisor or manager, this is a thing. You do this with regularity. You get to decide the amount of time. And again, amount of time, even how much time do you spend in those meetings, right? It's not about quantity as much as it is about the quality. But maybe even somewhat of the structure. What are the regular questions that we're spending time on, which is a little bit about project update, organizational update, but also how are you doing? The pandemic really taught us, how are you as a person doing? Not just how are you doing in the job, but how are you doing? Because if you're overwhelmed or stressed, or if there's a potential conflict, don't we want to know about that sooner rather than later? But if they have a little bit of a structure, a little bit of an agenda, everybody's on the same page about that. We know what to expect in those, right? So being able to also think about, how does the person work well? So some of us need a little bit more time in thinking about things. So I like your concept of, whatever it is we're going to talk about, do I know about it in advance so that I have time to think about it, to formulate answers, to think about my own questions back to you in regards to things. So being able to have people feel more comfortable, because you're right, not everybody is just a talker, and that's okay. But if everybody says everything's okay, everything's okay, everything's okay, that's kind of a clue to me that maybe everything isn't okay. And that's something for us to think about, right? Okay. So recognition is a big deal about the quiet quitting kind of component. And we need to pay attention to that, because that's really them telling us things aren't okay at all. But there's also quiet firing. And this is us not, as an organization, not really having the conversations that we need to have, right? Where we would rather have employees leave than actually fire them. And the answer is, I had someone say to me the other day, well, if we just make it so uncomfortable for them, they'll eventually leave. I don't think that that's good practice. I don't think that that's good at all. So, and this isn't new. This isn't new. I've shared a story back when I was like 17 years old, and I worked for a grocery store. And I went in every week to learn what my schedule was going to be for the next week. It was kind of like, it'll be posted at said time, come in, take a look. And I went in and my hours just kept dropping and dropping and dropping, to eventually I wasn't on the schedule. And I wasn't on the schedule, and I wasn't on the schedule. And no one said a word to me. Just after 4 weeks, I wasn't on the schedule anymore. And I guess I was out of a job. No one told me in the grocery business you needed to join the union. Oh, if you don't join the union, you don't get to stay employed. Might have been nice to know that. Rebecca, your little box lit up. or not. So do we have any of this going on, do we think? Or heard stories or rumors?
This is
Or you're-
Teresa. Yes, yes, it is going on. I'm seeing it here. And my frustration with the quiet firing, like you mentioned, is that instead of dealing with the issue, whatever it is, it could be production, it could be their ability to do the job or whatever, or it could be attendance or performance, any of those things. Instead of actually actively counseling, mentoring that person to help them correct their issues, they ignore it. And then that person gets frustrated because they don't get, not necessarily the hours, but the training that they need or whatever. And then they get frustrated and then they do quit. Or the opposite, that they will continue to tell the manager, I need this, I need this, I need this. And the manager does not address it at all. All I hear is crickets. And not only does it damage the person's morale, it damages their team around them, because sometimes they'll share that. Not like, they'll feel the frustration. So it's not just completely quiet, because I see it affecting the other team members and their frustration. And it's part of the culture too. And some managers have said, I hate confrontation. I hate, and it's like, it's not personal. If you just take that, you're just addressing a process you're addressing. And if you go towards it as, I'm trying to help or mentor this person, it doesn't have to be confrontation. And on the quiet part, that frustration for the firing, that really resonates, where the person quits and walks away because they're frustrated. And then on the flip side, the other part, the quiet quitting, where people are not getting the feedback from their supervisor of, hey, I really appreciate you taking these numerous tasks. And it's not about the money 100%. Because a lot of people are like, okay, it's all about the money. I can go get, tons of money and blah, blah, blah. No, it could be something as simple as every meeting, that weekly meeting you're supposed to have, it gets canceled, right? For 4 weeks. It's been 4 weeks, right? That person hasn't heard from you as a manager. And there's not we really need to, you are important to me. We need to meet. I'm going to make it my priority to meet with you and talk to you about what's going on in the company, what I need from you or whatever, so that it can go either way. The person will be just like, okay, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut, my head down. And you have kept counseling this meeting for the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and the excuse is, I'm too busy, I don't have time, I don't. And it's not a mean or malicious intent, it is, we're all human and we get overwhelmed, and it seems like people are just trying to put fires out and react, but then they forget to take care of their people.
Yes.
So this subject is really big, so thank you.
No, Teresa, I really appreciate those comments, because I think one of the things that you're really reinforcing, that's kind of I don't know if I would say pet peeve, but I can get on my soapbox about, is how vitally important it is for, whether, again, we call them managers or supervisors, what that role means inside our organizations, how important it is for training them on what we expect from them and what that role really means and does, because feedback is a gift. It doesn't always feel like one at the time, as I always say, but if we don't do it, they can't change. An employee can't change what they do not know and what they're not willing to acknowledge.
Yeah.
And that is what we expect of our supervisors and managers, is to give that feedback.
Yeah.
I think few of us like confrontation. We do like conversation and
Yeah,
it's all in the approach. And we're not doing our jobs if we're not providing feedback to employees. And if you're not comfortable doing that, HR's job is to help train you on how to be more comfortable with that,
Yeah.
some ideas and suggestions. And if you're really not okay with that, then this is where Deborah's head, kind of goes, maybe supervision isn't for you, because that's one of our expectations.
yeah,
And otherwise, we're letting down the people. And we already know, most of us know, Gallup has done a survey countless times. And I actually have an additional item from Gallup today for you all. Gallup has done surveys year after year after year, and it tells us constantly, employees don't leave their organizations, they leave their supervisors.
yeah,
They don't have the kind of relationship with them that they want. And we're not doing what we need to be doing for them, for the employees, because we haven't learned what's the relationship they need and want, and how to flex to them. So you're bringing up some wonderful observations about the importance, the investment, and it really is an investment in
Yeah.
our people. So, because the last thing we need to do is have them leaving because we aren't doing what we need to be doing, when talent is so important and skills are not always exactly where we need them. And if we've spent time and energy getting them to where we need them to be, and they're going to leave, we've invested, and our investment just walked out the door. Right. And that goes along with quiet hiring. This is that element of, we've got employees who are with us, but we've got gaps, or we've got people who have left and we're asking people to fill in. And instead of hiring again, we're asking people to kind of take over, fill in the gaps. We say it's for a short period of time, but how many of us have had somebody, and you guys tell me, how many of us have had somebody who is still in a position where we're asking them to fill in and it's been over a year, or they've absorbed some of the responsibilities of another position for a period of time?
Yes, 100%, yes.
And they're saying, when are we going to have somebody? Or maybe you just need to start paying me because it's a little bit more of a hybrid kind of position now. Or I'm not even getting recognition for the fact that I'm doing this, or that I've been doing this for longer than we agreed. And that's the thing, I think, is that it never comes up in conversation. And then it becomes what we don't talk about. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Robin, Amy, Kathy, any thoughts from you on these? Love to have you weigh in.
We're a small business, so it happens to everybody. And though we try so hard to recruit and hire, it's becoming harder and harder to fill those roles, and they just get absorbed. And I know it's frustrating. I'm one of the biggest ones that have absorbed positions. And even though I'm the one doing the recruiting, it's still equally as frustrating when I can't find somebody to fill that role. So I feel what other employees are feeling, and I work really hard to try to fill those, but it's been tough the last year or two to do that.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that what we've got that's, I believe, increasing is a skills gap. We've got a skills gap. And one of the things that has recently come out is that the cost of college is not decreasing. We also know that college isn't the right answer for every job and every position. And I think organizations and HR professionals specifically are taking a look at, when we think about the minimum qualifications, what are the qualifications for a job? Is a degree really required? Is it really necessary? So data has come out that average cost of a year of college is $90,000. So over a 4-year period of time, it's a lot of money, depending on what we're studying. And that 2 of those 4 years is starting to become obsolete, because so much is the technology, the knowledge is moving so fast. So by the time they end, maybe the last 2 years is the most relevant. Okay, so where did that money go, really? 2, when they come out of college, then do they have what we need to do the work that we have? And a lot of employers are saying, no, they really don't have everything that we need. If all that is true, and let's just say for the sake of the conversation that it is, I think what that means for us as employers is that means we're going to have to do a lot more on-the-job training than perhaps previously we've had to do, which means HR, we're going to either need to ask our managers and supervisors to be more involved in that upfront training piece. We're going to have larger training budgets or hire a training individual or persons to aid in that process, because we're going to have more upfront, because they're not coming in the door with everything that we're looking for, which means more upfront time and cost. So just something for you to be thinking about in terms of the hiring piece, the quote unquote letting go piece that really isn't part of this conversation, but kind of is if not handled well. So take that information for what it's worth, because here's the deal. I don't know if you've heard of this one. Quiet constraint. This is not sharing information with key players. I've got it. You supposedly want it, need it, but I'm not so inclined to share right now, or not share in a timely manner. I'm going to withhold this. What? What? I can see that being a unhappy camper, and maybe someone wanting to get even, get back at, causing mishigash. But what? Why are we in the practice of withholding vital information for others?
Have a little bit of that with one of our positions. It's not really withholding information though, it's withholding some key duties that they won't train anyone else on. It's job security.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you how. This is my job.
Okay. So I'm trying to do everything to continue to secure my employment so that, okay. Okay. Good observation. Thank you for that, Robin. Are we seeing any of that in our workplaces? Are we seeing that behavior?
Yeah, and it seems to be the most senior people that are doing that for whatever reason. Or, I could speculate it's a feeling of ego, a feeling of power, a feeling of I'm so important. There's no way that I would be let go. But I do believe my observation, it's a lot of ego driven, especially if it's an employee that's been long term. The newer employees, I have not seen it as much, but long term senior employees that's my observation.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It's my job, come and get it.
Say that again, Robin.
I tell my subordinates, if they want my job, come and get it. In other words, learn what I'm doing, I'll train you all you want, and you can have my job. I will give it to you.
Please take my job. Yeah, it's not, yeah. Feel free, because honestly, there's you take what you think is my job. There'll still be lots of other stuff for me to do. Yes. Oh, that's crazy. Okay. Well, I appreciate those observations, because I hadn't quite gone there. And actually, this one was a fairly new one for me. I just added this like a week or so, or maybe 2 weeks ago, when I heard somebody say that, and I said, pardon me, we got to talk a little bit more about that, because I don't think I know. And I'm doing this program. I'm actually doing this a full-blown couple hours program on this. And I knew I was touching base with for us all in terms of Lunch Bunch. And I was like, I got to add that because that's a thing and people should know. And when I say a thing, if people are out there talking about it, I think HR should at least be aware of, because is it something our employees are going to talk about? Is it something that they're researching? Is it something that they're watching on TikTok? Is it something that it's on Instagram? Where is it that this is popping up? Because honestly, I kid you not, I'm part of a HR networking group that gets together on, and I'm a little worried about this, and I actually asked them about it months and months ago on Twitter. We get together twice a month and we have this conversation. We have a chat, a tweet fest, as it were. We pick different topics and somebody facilitates all the questions and everybody chimes in. And we do it all and we don't get to even see each other. We just, tweet. But one of the things that came up was conversations around what is some of the things that are annoying you or you're hearing or seeing. And someone said, I really am annoyed by the fact that somebody in HR came up with this quiet quitting thing. I had to read that twice. And I said, I'm trying to remember, because I always try and be really, really, really politically correct with this group, because they are HR professionals, mostly, I mean, all over the country, but I think there's like one person from California. Everybody is like Midwest to the East Coast. I'm like, they call me the West Coast correspondent because I'm like the only person on this side of the equation. And I'm like, I believe this was a TikTok thing from a young employee working someplace. HR didn't start this. HR doesn't usually start this stuff. I just believe we should be aware of what our employees are talking about. So anyway, that was July of, I think it was beyond last year. But if not, it's been a solid year since this has been going on. So when it comes to the quiet constraint, just stuff for us to know, let alone the quiet promoting, right? It's so if we're giving things to a part-time worker rather than full-time replacements, and we'd rather not hire full-time employees, I don't know if that's based on benefits or we like the temp to hire scenario, or quiet promoting, giving more and more to employees without actually compensating them for that work. That's not okay. And that could lead to our other challenges of the quiet quitting. So, and I see that happening a fair amount. So I think that quiet hiring and promoting kind of go in tandem with each other. And that's kind of a conversation for us to think about. And, when I think about who do we have on staff and why wouldn't we promote them? Is it because of no room at the inn? Is it because of titles? Is it because of budget? What are you guys experiencing though? Why we wouldn't promote? What's getting in our way of that? Is there legitimate business scenarios and we're just not having the conversations?
I think a lot of times the leadership is blind to what they actually have in their teams and their abilities. Because I had asked a question, well, why can't this person be a project engineer? Why couldn't they just, transition from this role because they know everybody in the company and blah. And they're like, well, they don't have the experience. So I'm like, well, they went to Portland State University. They know Excel, they do data, and so taking that information, and they actually have a degree, and the team wasn't even aware that this person had a degree and didn't even know that they had, the transferable skills that they could. And so they're going to export a little further, but I think it's just part of the problem is they don't even know the people and what kind of tools that they had pre-existing from previous, jobs or experience. And then they just need that curtain opened a little bit, or that person had not expressed an interest in that role because they didn't think that they had, because the job description is one thing. When it says, okay, you got to have a bachelor's degree in construction management, you have to have 7 years of project engineering, and then you kind of dig a little further and say, well, you do have transferable. And sometimes I think HR, we have that ability if we're aware of it. And I think manager skills too is having, like you said earlier, the conversations, those weekly conversations where your people, and reflecting back when we have a job opening. Oh, by the way, when we first hired this person in shipping and receiving, they expressed that they wanted to grow into project engineering or project management. That would be helpful. And I just think it's a bunch of things, but I do think it ties back to your original statement. It's like, why don't you have that conversation?
And, I think early on, Carla, weren't you the one who said something about goals? Or maybe that was Anne. Somebody said something about goals, personal goals. Maybe that was Anne. And just that whole element of, do we even know what those are? Are we talking about that? Because that would be part of, I think, part of your, not necessarily every check-in meeting,
Right.
but are we making progress towards our goals? Do we even know what those are? Is that part of our process in general? Are we, even if that isn't, do we genuinely care about our employees and want them to be successful and succeed? And we would ask them, if you weren't doing this job, what else would you like to be doing? Because I think also part of our conversation in retention could be an element of stay interviews, from the standpoint of, if you've been here for, the organization I was with yesterday, they had several people who had been there 28 years. They had people who had been there 19 years, people who had been there 9 years and 8 years. They only had one person who had been there 2 years. That's part of the supervisory group that I'm working with. And it was kind of like there was this pattern. And one guy goes, well, we were hired at the same time. And he goes, so are we. And they've stayed. But that's the kind of thing that, why do you keep working here? And not like, why do you keep working here? But kind of like, what keeps you here? What keeps you getting out of bed every morning to come to work?
Yeah.
And if you could change something about here, what would it be? If you could do another job, do you have an interest in something else? Because better to keep them within than to lose them. So are we even asking those questions? Do we care enough about them? Because even if we're not a good match for them anymore, something's changed, I still want them to be successful and succeed.
Yes.
I mean, and I won't only speak for our organization. I mean, we're a baby organization in the grand scheme of things. You can't really go from an administrative support person in any level of our organization to a consultant. Where's all the HR experience? And we typically hire consultants that have at least 10 years of HR experience, because we need that for our clients. So if you only have 2 or 3 years, you haven't really been in it. So how are you going to get that if you've only been with us for a couple of years of HR? You got to leave and be a boomerang and come back. So go get that experience and come back. So I want you to be successful. So I'm just saying, you got to have those conversations so that they kind of know what to expect, but also we can help you get there.
Yeah.
If not with us, elsewhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, so quiet promoting. And then there's actually something called quiet leading, assigning to managers and bosses who don't actively build relationships in their teams. Instead, they're detached, decline the employee engagement and productivity. So the leading is like declining. Are they really leaders? Is that the kind of leaders we're looking for? I don't think so. If they're not actually building up the team, building rapport, building trust, detached. There's do I have that in the, I might have that in one of the other slides for you. We need actively engaged managers, so we have actively engaged employees. I think that's how this works, but maybe that's just me. So what are we doing as an organization to support, reinforce, recognize our managers, and making sure they're feeling the love, so to speak, but checking in with them, what's going on for them? Why, where did they lose that love and feeling for the organization in some fashion? Did they ever have it truly? But making sure that, are we doing stuff for them? And whether that's ongoing education or challenging opportunities, are they checking out because they're not seeing opportunities to move up, because others aren't moving up, or they're not retiring? That can be a thing with our 5 generations in the workplace. Right now, our Gen Xers, our oldest ones are retirement age. They're approaching retirement in the Gen X window. And so, hello, do they want to? Are they feeling it? Can they? If they're not going to, we already know 10,000 boomers a day are retiring, but it's a huge population and some of them aren't. Well, that's not leaving opportunities for others. So how is that impacting all of our generations that are looking for those opportunities? So just some quiet trends for us to be thinking about, paying attention to, listening for, is it playing out in our organization? Because just last week, so I just put this in here for you, some of the quiet quitting isn't quiet. Now, have you heard this? You tell me. There's loud quitting. And I was like, okay, take a step back. I need to understand more about this. But Gallup just did a survey that came out this year. And it was a global workplace report that found that 18% of employees that are surveyed were doing just that, as in they were loud quitting. These are the actively disengaged people. And let's see, if I remember correctly, it was something like 122,000 employed people from the age of 15 on up were interviewed. Wow. And so basically the whole premise is, and that's 1 in 5 employees in terms of this, and they're directly doing something that harms the organization or somehow undercutting our activities, our goals, the performance. They're speaking out against. I don't know that they necessarily said how they're speaking out, whether it was social media, verbally, both, I'm guessing. But this is a problem. This is a concern in my book. I mean, quiet is bad enough, but being that outright verbal, anybody hearing, reading, seeing any info on this?
I experienced it in senior leadership that thought that it was okay to express their frustrations with team members, and especially young or new hires, or that they had their frustrations with leadership and they thought it was okay to maliciously express their frustrations. So how I dealt with that was brought that person privately and said, I'm aware of how you're expressing, and it would be best if you need to have your frustrations talk directly to your supervisor. Is not correct in a new hire orientation to express your frustrations with the team or with this company. So
Wow.
what I've discovered with the couple of these individuals was that if they stopped it, but now they're doing it. It's coming back to HR discreetly, if that makes sense. So instead of being blatantly putting their frustrations, now they're being more discreet. So I don't know which is better. I don't know. And I've addressed it with the leadership, and it just continues. It'll under the radar.
Well, I mean, I value authenticity and honesty. I do think that there's a difference between if I've got frustrations, who I'm sharing that frustration with, and where and how. Because the answer is, if I'm really struggling with somebody, the answer is, or if I'm struggling with something inside the organization, you report up, you share up, you never share down, and you don't like lose your cool in front of others. And especially with a leader within the organization, you don't need to share that so all the employees are hearing that, because now the employee's like, well, what am I supposed to do with this information? And especially if I think it might be about me, right? So being able to, if we were to take this conversation, just detour a little bit, we could talk about what's our emotional intelligence,
Right.
and how self-aware are we, and how good are we at regulating our emotions in any given situation? And the answer is, we need, I think that EI is something that all of us should be training our managers and supervisors about, because that impacts us every day and how they interact with people and manage their people. But yeah, this loud quitting has me a little disturbed, because this can hurt the reputation of an organization. And we've all heard the stories of people, organizations having conversations with staff, and you see them one by one going into a conference room, getting the conversation that they're losing their job, and walking back to their desk, collecting their stuff and walking out, and people going, something's happening here, and they get out their phone and they're recording all of this, and they're going, people are losing their jobs, and I'm hoping I'm not going to be one of them. And then all of a sudden they're getting the pink slip, so to speak, and they're posting it on social media. Okay, and we've heard the stories of it was just given to all of us via an email. This is not the right way to handle those. We all know that that's not the right way to do it, and yet things still keep happening. And it's like, what's the right kind of element of respect given to human beings and decorum in our workplaces with all of this? And now throw in this piece. And what this tells me is that we aren't being respectful. What is workplace etiquette, regardless of where our workplace is? Things are changing in terms of our workplace, but it shouldn't be so changing that we are being forgetful of some of our foundational items. This is unacceptable. This is completely unprofessional at all kinds of levels. I think we can agree to that. Now, how we all want to handle it might be a different story. And here's one more piece, because we're getting close to the end of our time. There's also conscious quitting. Now, don't know what your population is inside your workplaces, but this is a special form of kind of termination, from the respects of, this is the employees terminating themselves because they're looking for an organization where they're better in alignment with the organization's values, because their values and the organization's don't match up, and they're looking for that alignment piece. And my hope would be that we might be doing a better job of that on the front side of the interview and the screening process. What are the core values of the organization? Are we sharing that? Is it being done as their part of their homework that they're looking at the organization? Is it on our website? Are we asking an interview question? In all sincerity, if you have core values, principles that the organization is founded and based on, and we're using those in our performance review processes, in the interview, ask the applicant, of our 6 core values that we have listed, provided, and truly, I don't mean just a brochure or they're on the wall. Do you truly live your core values? Asking them, of our 6 core values, which one do you most closely relate to, or do you mostly, find that you're most in alignment with? It would also let you know if they've done their homework and do they know them, but it also would let you know whether or not they're in sync with that. Because, and this is for the most part, this is really becoming what they're calling kind of the morality piece of our Gen Zs. They're looking to see whether or not they are with you, and if they aren't, they're going to leave. And I'm not saying that organizations don't have transitions, just like employees do. I would think we would be finding this out more on the front side. But they're leaving because of this, which means everybody didn't do as good a job on the front side, I'm thinking. Because I would like us to get to a quiet thrivers. Couldn't we have this be the, not all that other negative stuff? Couldn't we have a culture of quiet thrivers where people are tapping into their passions, their purpose, their whys, and that we're asking about some of that, and we're harnessing and harvesting and encouraging that this is not an HR conversation, that we're helping our managers and supervisors getting there. That psychological safety, the trust and the care and feeding of our employees, that their goals and our goals, that they're helping us get there, that we're sharing that, we're building that together in a performance partnership kind of way. Because when we've got truly engaged people, managers, supervisors, employees, sky's the limit, I think. I don't know. Your guys' thoughts, observations?
Agree, that would be the goal, that we're all working as a team to hit, to be successful and to, have to be happy and fluffy unicorns all the time, but we're all trying to be successful. So yeah, that would be great if we were all together doing that.
Yeah. Before the pandemic, one of the key words that people were using was, is my job fulfilling? I think during the pandemic and post-pandemic, a lot of people were like, what am I doing? Where am I doing it? How am I doing it? For who am I doing it? Is this working? Okay, great. So maybe fulfillment isn't the right word today. I'm not sure I know what the substitute word is. I'm not sure I'm supposed to know. I'm just wondering, hey, what are we all doing? Can we get there? Can we make it part of the conversation? So I would encourage you to type in any other notes in the chat box for me. I'm glad you were part of this one. I really appreciate the conversation. Just so you know, next month, which will be in August, on August 2nd, I've invited Christine Engler to join me. Now, she is from the great state of Ohio, and she's hardcore Ohio, I tell you. But anyway, she works for a company called Willery, and they're kind of, one of their main things is around benefits, but they're a little bit like a consulting firm like myself. And we're going to talk about creative benefits or thinking about them a little bit differently. What are we offering? what makes sense for employees today. Have we got the right mix? That sort of thing. So depending on your availability in August, and if you're not on vacation and you want to kind of chat benefits, then we would love to have you join us. So open for questions and conversation, because I always stick around and be the last person out to be able to kind of chat and network and whatnot. Otherwise, I'm glad that you were able to be a part of this one. And we hopefully join you again in the future. All righty, I'll stop the recording. Thank you so much, everybody.